Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming to this Citi Fintech Meetup, the third one that we already have since we started this in December last year. To me, this is a very special place because obviously it connects what technology is all about and also cities, which is what we're going to talk about today. And this is, have you guys been here before? Show hands. Okay, so not too many people have seen this building. It's not just the architecture about it, it's also what technology has done to music. And next time you're nearby, if you take a look at the wall when they are projecting the music that is happening inside and they project it outside, it's a great way to see how technology can connect music into what happens with the cities and how the cities can evolve because of art. So the topic today is about cities and it's about technology. We believe that everything that happens in people's lifestyle has something to do with fintech. And what we have in cities, obviously, is all about lifestyle. So for that, let me introduce you to Mark Paris, who runs for us for Citibank. He does urban innovation, and he also has the authority to manage a fund that invests in technology related to social impact investment. So he has been with Citi many years. He's a fantastic guy, very senior within the organization. He knows a lot about technology, and he knows a lot about how the cities can evolve with new technologies that will drive the future for those. So, Mark, with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to bring the panel right up so we can get going on this. Come on up, guys. The deputy mayor will sit at the end there. Let's bring Serge next to me, Sean right there. And there's another microphone, I believe, somewhere hiding. You guys may want to grab that. This feels formal, but it's not. We're going to really encourage everybody to feel free to ask some questions. We're going to get started with some questions, and then hopefully give you an opportunity, because we have a great panel here. We have the public sector. We have in the private sector, we have a CEO of a company, a startup, and we have an individual who is a venture fund. So we are really privileged to have these individuals here. I have spent some of my time in what is called strategic investment at Citi, focused on urban innovation, specifically with a twist toward, as Jorge said, impact investing, working with lower moderate income communities especially, to see how and where and why and if we can drive and assist in change for all the various challenges and opportunities in the urban landscape. Some of the themes that we're going to talk about that many of you are aware of, if not all of you, we're going to focus on mobility, deal with issues of crime, education, environment, housing, energy, poverty, health, and one of my favorites is civic engagement. So clearly there's opportunity for innovation in all those areas. I'm sure I missed about 15 other areas of urbanism. And as you all know, population of the world is getting more and more concentrated in city centers. In fact, every one of the panels that I've ever been involved in, someone always makes the comment that 50% or greater of our individuals in this world will be living in cities by, pick a number, 2020? Already? It's already. Yeah, it is already. That's a test of our panelists, and they passed. So let me introduce our panelists before I go any further and get thrown off the stage. First of all, to my far left, we're honored to have Deputy Mayor Russell Benford of Miami-Dade County. And he serves in the largest county in the state of Florida and the 8th largest in the United States. He uses his knowledge of growth management, capital planning, and economic development to provide direct oversight to the community action and human services, corrections, fire, juvenile services, medical examiner, police and public housing, and community development departments. That's all? Okay. Additionally, he serves as liaison to the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust, Homeless Trust, and Career Source South Florida. Mr. Benford serves as the board of directors of the CAA Advisory Board, Miami-Dade Zoo Oversight Board, United Way, Miami Children's Initiative, Early Learning Coalition, and the Youth Crime Task Force. Russell is also actively involved in community organizations, including 100 Black Men of South Florida and 5,000 Role Models of Excellence. He has recently been honored as a 2014 Community Pillar for his supportive programs which positively impact the community and his commitment to public service. Mr. Benford's professional experience includes 20 years in government, having held positions as city manager of North Miami from 2010 to 11, the city manager of West Park in Broward County, Florida from 2005 to 2010, and the village manager of Hawthorne Woods in Illinois from 2000 to 2005. I already wrote on what basketball team he favors. And of course, it's the Heat, isn't that correct? Yes. Okay.
That is correct.
Prior to that, he has a background in planning and neighborhood services with the city of Plano, Texas. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Oberlin, which I think is interesting because Oberlin has one of the great conservatories in this country, and of course with the New World Symphony here, also a great institution of classical music. And a master's degree in public affairs from the University of Texas at Austin, where he concentrated in public administration and management and was named a Woodrow Wilson Public Policy and International Studies Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Mayor Benford. To his direct right is Sean Abramson, leads Urban Us, a seed stage in venture fund and network of advisors serving startups that make cities better. He is a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and author. Any investor in startups is an angel in my book, I have to tell you. He lives in Miami with his wife and artist Andrea Nush and 2 kids, Max and Oli. If he's not working or with his family, you will find him one-wheeling or swimming. So Sean co-founded Urban Us to find and serve startups that make cities better. Urban Us currently works with 15 startups and a global network of more than 400 advisors. Startups work on problems including low energy buildings, water management, personal mobility, parking systems, social services, e-waste, paperless government, and resilient connectivity. In addition, he is an author. Crowdstorm, his first book, is a guide to working with large online crowds to find and evaluate ideas. The book is a result of his experiences running innovation challenges with clients such as Starbucks, as well as $300 House and Life Edited. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Abramson. And finally with me is our co-founder and chief executive officer of Yellow Pepper, Serge Elkiner, Yellow Pepper is an innovative company that right here that provides mobile banking and payment solutions across Latin America. See, we do have fintech wrapped into this whole thing. Under Serge's leadership, Yellow Pepper is revolutionizing the banking and payments industry by making mobile payments a reality. His unique vision is bearing fruit, forging partnerships with major banks, financial institutions, and business enterprises alike. Across the region, Yellow Pepper currently provides financial services to more than 5 million monthly users. Ladies and gentlemen, Serge Elkiner. Okay, let me start with the Deputy Mayor. Our topic is about urban innovation and dealing with the challenges, problems, and opportunities of urbanism. So why don't I start with you to ask, what do you see in that landscape? What opportunities are out there in regards to Miami-Dade or Miami itself or outside of that area?
Well, certainly one of our challenges right now is to really look at technology and how we can actually use technology and innovation to make the lives better for the people that live here in Miami-Dade County. Just as an example, today, at about 10:30 this morning, the mayor launched a new app that we partnered with Microsoft to create. It's called COPA, Citizens on Patrol. And it was really starting out with the thought of what does every person always have with them? We always have a cell phone. And people use their cell phones for all kinds of things. We call, we text, we tweet. What if we could use a cell phone as a crime-fighting app? What if you saw a crime, you wanted to take a picture, you didn't necessarily want to call 911 and give a description. And so the thought was, well, what if we can create an app that could just send a picture of maybe something that was happening, and we could send it directly to the police department, even anonymously if you didn't want to leave your name, but at least you can give the police department a photograph of the description and the location information of where something suspicious could be happening. And so the tagline is now we have 2.5 million cops, in Miami-Dade County, and what could that do to make our lives better? So those are some of the advantages as folks like you look to innovate in the private sector. If we can try to show you ways that you can work with the public sector as well, to not only have a successful business model that works and you can make money doing it, but also can improve the lives of the people that live in this community. And that's the selling point for us is it has a different type of value, but it certainly has value for all of you who want to work with government to innovate in that way to really improve the lives of all of us here. So that's just kind of one example, but there are many like that, and I think it crosses over into any sector.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So let me just follow on that question for a second. How does Miami-Dade encourage innovation in the community? Are there programs on the economic development side or the infrastructure side, et cetera, that encourage innovation and in this arena?
Well, there are two that I can think of just off the top of my head that are not necessarily unique to Miami-Dade County, but I think they're unique in their effectiveness. And the two tools are really microlending and incubators. And those are two things that we financially support. Now, we understand that access to capital is an issue. So, especially speaking to the two gentlemen next to me, I mean, all three of you, you obviously got to the point where access to capital is not as much of an issue, but at some point, you had to get that first business loan. You had to have somebody have a little bit of faith in your first idea enough to loan you a few dollars to start your first idea. And so we fund to the tune of a few $1 million a year. We fund 3 or 4 micro-lending agencies that then in turn provide microloans to small businesses here in Miami-Dade County. And it could be anything. Sometimes it's check related, it's service industry, it could be a home-based business. There's all types of things that we provide microloans for. Some are successful, some are not. We don't look at our rate of return necessarily as dollars back into the program. We just look for successful businesses. And we want to see people continue to use our microloan program as a way to try to start new businesses here. And we figure some are going to stick, some are going to work, and that's a good investment. The second one are incubators. We fund several business incubators, small business incubators throughout Miami-Dade County, where we essentially may provide a building. We may provide some startup capital for office equipment and telephones, or to a nonprofit agency to run that. And various companies can come in. We could have 10, 15, 20 small businesses working in one incubator. And just as an example, we had an incubator in South County down in the Homestead area. There were 2 guys who started a small business, and they actually created a pacemaker that had a battery that had some type of nuclear. It was powered by a small nuclear device, and the life was seriously. And so the life of this battery was like 40, 50 years. Now what happened was the military somehow picked up on this innovation, and they entered into a contract with these 2 gentlemen. It was like a $40 or $50 million contract to develop miniature nuclear-powered devices for whatever application that they could figure out in the military. So that's just one example of 2 guys who...
So I have heart disease, so if I get one of these things, they're not going to let me go to Iran anymore, I assume.
That's correct. I don't know what will happen to you, but the battery will work for 100 years. You may not make it. So, but those are just examples of unique ideas that, it may be hard for somebody or two young guys to find space in a traditional sense, somewhere like Miami Beach or Midtown or downtown Miami. Capital needs are huge for a startup company, but for small companies that can get entry into a workspace for a relatively small amount of money, less than $1,000, to actually secure a workspace for even 6 months with a telephone, computer, and actually a roof over your head to actually do your business is incredible. That just saves people a ton of money and allows them to invest those funds into innovation. So the incubators and the micro-lending are 2 of the things that have been fairly successful for us, depending on how you measure success. The nuclear story is one example, an extreme example, but even if it's a small business that does lawn care or roofing, if it employs people, it creates jobs. Here in Miami-Dade County, for us, it's a success. It's not, we don't measure it on the dollars that company makes, but on the number of people it employs. That's typically our measurement, is that, you know, you create a business and that business creates jobs for people here in Miami-Dade County, and that's our litmus test.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sean, you're not off the hook. I have some more questions for you later. Sean, what mega trends in the urban innovation landscape are interesting to you as you're out there looking at opportunities to invest, to partner with startups out there, especially at the early stage that you're seeing? I'm just curious, could you comment on that?
Sure, I think probably the most interesting is connected devices. So we don't think about how poorly we've engineered cities. And this is not a dig at anyone. This is just in the previous generation of technology, when you decided to build out a water system, you had a physical system that cost, I don't know, billions. And that was it. You went about building the physical space in a certain way. And what's changed fundamentally is we can now monitor pretty much any resource that you use in the city. Right? You can monitor the flow of water, you can monitor waste, obviously products coming in, recycling. And so there's this optimization happening where we just see lots of opportunity, particularly for startups, to pick a resource, watch it very closely, and then just change how we use it. So this sort of plays out in some obvious ways, but some less obvious ways. So a couple of examples. We have a company that makes an irrigation controller, right? So you take your normal control that you have, you switch this out, it takes about 15 minutes, connects to the internet, and starts to figure out things like wind speed, rainfall, etc. And automatically you start saving about 30% on your water usage. And when you look at how your water usage works, particularly if you live outside of the urban core, a lot of it is irrigation, right? We're growing the largest crop in the US, which is lawn, right? And so that, when you put that together, when you look at that as a municipal water system, suddenly you have a device that's shipping through Amazon that can actually impact how you plan and think about infrastructure needs. And that's just one piece of the water system. It's one particular thing. If you move that further along, you have other impacts, like assuming I could figure out how much water is flowing into your home, I could figure out if you have a toilet that's leaking. But I could also figure out if a flood has started. And so you play that through to the insurance business. 20 to 25% of losses are related to flooding. And now you have another interesting sort of perspective on, no one bothered to look at this in a long time. But I think in the next 10 years we'll rewrite all the actuarial tables, because we'll suddenly have new data and new devices that let us do it. So I know that sounds very engineering-y, but I think that's sort of the biggest thing in terms of trends. If PC was sort of the first and the internet was the next, I think every time we connect another device to the internet, there's a massive opportunity for a very, very different way to look at infrastructure. That's a big deal.
In your early stage, we're talking, chunks of 50,000 or so for investments.
Oh, yeah, we are not the person you want to sort of take the whole deal. So our focus, what we believe, is that early on you should be able to convince a group of investors, right? You should be able to convince more than just us. We are relatively too easy to convince, so we are not a good litmus test. But we spend a lot of time trying to help people get through what we call the valley of death. And the valley of death, unfortunately, is where most startups disappear and you'll never hear from them again. It's the point where you go from your initial fundraising, you try and figure out how to get your products to work, how to get your first customers, and as you're trying to climb out of the valley, a lot of the time you just don't get there. But there are things that you can do to increase your chance of success. And one of those things very often is very simple, which is not raising more money, but actually finding customers. And so one challenge that we see very often is there are lots of people that want to sell into local government. They have really interesting solutions. It could be related to public safety, it could be related to analytics for municipal water systems. most of those startups never make it because their sales cycle can take 6, 12 or longer, but that's changing. And so what we find to be very interesting is if I can find 5 or 6 founders that have figured out how to get through the procurement process and not die, not obviously physically die, but not kill their companies, suddenly we can get those people together and they can, trade knowledge that they understand in a way that Serge will be able to do when he does business development, which is very common for all other startups. So the money is it's a tiny part of what we think about. We think a lot more about how do we help our companies find customers.
So in the scaling process, when it's public sector related for some of your companies, I assume that's not every one of the companies that you're invested in are focused on government as a customer. Is that correct?
Right. So I think with our next 2 investments, it's less than 10%.
Okay. For those, and I'm curious, Deputy Mayor, if you could comment on this. Sales cycle is definitely a challenge for those startups out here in the audience or elsewhere who are speaking to government. And I think you were generous at 6 to 12 months, by the way. I think it'd be much longer.
I'm trying to play nice.
You're very nice. But I'm curious, are there any thoughts about, or this could go all 3 of you, any thoughts about ways to manage that sales cycle challenge that you see out there, especially for, a company that's just crossed over the technology hump and is just entering into the revenue cycle? I mean, it's a tough time. As you said, it is the valley of death.
So I think there's some hacks that we've seen that I think work very well. So there's different thresholds for spending that would, I don't like to say avoid procurement, but certainly enable you to get a reference customer, earn some revenue, and be able to demonstrate that you've been able to get through the sales process. And then in some way at least be able to inform the RFP process so that you at least are in a consideration set. So whoever is writing that RFP actually understands, after seeing your product, what features or what functions they might want when they eventually do the RFP. The other thing is a little bit less obvious, and that is to just partner with an existing service provider. Right? So obviously there's the IBMs and the Microsofts and the Ciscos. What's really interesting is there's a company about an hour from here, and I think they were adding merge, called Smart Procure. Smart Procure has done something really interesting, which is, unlike traditional business, you can do a Freedom of Information Act request and get data about vendors. And then you can structure that data and search it. And so in the case of Smart Procure, I can go and look at who the current vendors are and potentially figure out who to approach for partnerships. And effectively it turns what could be a long sales cycle into a business development discussion. And I think we're only starting to see that because that data, you couldn't get that very easily 12 months ago even.
And I think those are great ideas, especially the point you had about partnerships. One of the things that you'll notice pretty much across the spectrum of government, especially large government, is that we typically will have some type of requirement for partnerships with small businesses, or even bonuses for small and local businesses. And so when we have these mega projects, like when we build a port tunnel or we're building the airport, those large companies will come from all over the world to bid, but they know they're going to have a certain percentage of their team has to be made up of small and local businesses. And that's where, if you can figure out which large companies are going to be best suited to get those contracts. And I even tell folks, every single company that's going to bid on a large procurement item, you need to be a partner with every single one. Don't try to guess which one you think is going to win the contract. Approach every single one, cut your own agreement that if they get the contract, this is what you will do for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing immoral about doing that or unethical about doing that. But that is a great point of entry. And in fact, for a lot of these large companies, in turn, we will, the government, encourage them to teach small businesses how to grow. In other words, create sort of like an internship program or an apprenticeship program within their large corporation for that small, local business so that they can learn to bid on these larger contracts, learn how the business is structured, access to capital, how to write bids, how to respond to procurements, all these different things that just the inner workings of what makes a successful company successful. And if you're able to do that, then the thought is we're encouraging someone to learn their trade a little bit better so that they in turn become successful. And it all links back to and then employ people who live here in Miami-Dade County. And so that was a great idea you had about doing that. And I encourage everybody to do, maybe all of our information is public. Every single company that has a contract with the government is a public record. The dollar amount, the principals, their office location, everything about that corporation.
Yeah, every startup wants a large customer, right? I think that's normal because that's where we feel the money is. Working with any type of large customer, whether it's government or whether in my case Citibank, it's tedious, it's complicated, it takes time, right? As we said, you said it's partnered with an established company because they actually have the money, have done it, and know the process and can hold off the few years. Like he was very generous, 6 to 12 months. The sales cycle in our case with large banks is actually about 1 year in every single case. And I think that's a problem for innovation. Why? Because if you think about it, in 1 or 2 years, the product that we're selling may be outdated. The rate of innovation is changing. Before it was 20 years, then 10 years, then now 5 years, then 1 year, 2 years. I mean, it's really changing. So you can't start pitching a product to a bank or a government, take 2 or 3 years to implement, and by the time you implement it, it's outdated. And the technology is not even relevant. So I think that there's a lot of things that need to change, not only on the way the startup can do business, but also the large corporation or the government, the way they see innovation. And I really believe in trial and error. So let's do smaller trials, and of course, not when you're building an airport, but when you're doing other types of projects where a startup has the same chance as an IBM, Cisco, Citrix, or others. Because if not, a startup can never be an IBM as fast as IBM is today, like 105 years or whatever they said they were recently in one of the innovation conference I was at. So I think we need to give chances to some of the startup. And yes, of course, once you have a few reference cases, it becomes easier. But even here, I was talking with, we do business with one country at Citi, and we try to implement in another country at Citi. And it's like if you're starting with a completely new bank. It doesn't matter that I have one country at Citi fully implemented. The procedures to get the second country live, it's actually as difficult as the first country, right? And Jorge was here on the stage, and his team at Global Acceleration of Innovation is actually trying to break that mold. And I think that's as important in terms of innovation is the companies receiving the innovation or being able to use it, or the government being able to use it, need to shorten the cycle of actually trying innovation. And in my mind, the first thing about innovation is that failure is actually acceptable, and it is an option. Because we fail, then we change it, and then we go back to the market with what we learned.
Keep going. Bounce off of you, I'm sorry. I've seen some freemium models out there for those that can have it with SaaS-based technologies, and you've seen some Trojan horse models where, they come in below that $5,000 or whatever the RFP price is. I don't know what it is in Miami-Dade. I assume there's a number somewhere. That of course is a bootstrap solution as well, but that's a very, very interesting idea. Another concept, not to throw it in, and folks, I'm going to ask you a few more questions, but I assume there are people, just show of hands who have questions, so I make sure we encourage 1, 2, okay. The other thing that I would say that we're starting to see more of throughout the United States, can't speak for the rest of the world as easily, is the networking of cities with each other so that they can work together to create trials so that the company that is struggling through its Death Valley can have a decent opportunity to test something out. If it doesn't work, well, so be it. But if you have 5 cities doing it at the same time, the adoption rate is going to be much, much better. And the risk to the cities individually is not as great as a result of the fact they're all doing this together. So networking cities, is, some cities have excellence, in one area versus another. New Orleans might be great at, food and restaurants, and San Francisco, maybe technology, but they can work together and collaboratively test things out. I'm about to ask you a question, but did you want to reflect on that? Or? Okay, so let me ask you about your story. You've owned your company, you've been CEO of your company for 10 years? Okay, so anybody who's familiar with startups, when someone's been there for 10 years, there's two general observations. One is probably lots of pivots and lots of evolution. Hopefully it's not the latter. But if you could just comment on your story a little bit so people can understand that journey relative to this conversation.
So yeah, so you're completely right. So actually it's a little bit of both, and I've always been very transparent about it. So we've pivoted a few times in the same area. I mean, one big pivot was in 2006. I started in 2004 in the mobile value-added service in the US actually. 2006 there were two big things that happened. I focused in Latin America, from the US but into Latam, so geographical focus. And the second thing is we focused in financial services. Financial services is what made us pivot a few more times, just because it's an industry that hasn't been disturbed or disrupted in the last 50 years. Basically, a bank still does business the way they do banks, the way they do banking, and payment is still Visa, MasterCard, American Express is still the same way, plastic card, and that's it. There is no innovation, or there hasn't been innovation in a long time. In the last 5 years, we've seen tremendous innovation, both in the US with small merchants, Square, and iSettle, and all of that, and then in the deployment of mobile, and of course, Apple Pay, Google Wallet, PayPal, disrupting that. So we did pivot a few times because I think you have to adapt, and that's where you learn by mistakes, right? So trial and error, which I think is so important, and you of course can't lose this resilience that it is to build a startup and to try to disrupt a major industry. And that's a little bit of the challenge that you have as a startup. Why? When you raise funding, we can talk about funding because Miami, as Sean was saying, and Deputy Mayor was saying, there is a fundamental problem of funding here in Miami. So we've raised $34 million and nothing comes from Miami. I'm a Miami-based company, right? So that's a major problem. Let's say a few hundreds of thousands come from here, local angel investors, but that's it. The problem is big VC or big money will only fund big disruption, right? So if you come with like a small market to disrupt, they're not interested because there is enough big markets to disrupt. And then when you go into a big market to disrupt, like the payment or banking, then you need to have, it's a marathon. Everybody always makes fun that it is a marathon, but it's truly a marathon. I've been at it for 8 years, so I really know. And now we're starting to see the hockey stick. So we had a few hockey sticks and down and up and down and up, like any startup. But now you see a huge hockey stick, and there's fundamental changes in the ecosystem, not on the banking side. But I started before the iPhone was a reality, so there was no smartphone in 2004, right? 2007. Birth of the smartphone or the iPhone in a sense, then Android. And then now we're talking about 90% of phones in the US or Europe and from Belgium are smartphones, and in Latin America, rate of growth of smartphones is literally 30% every semester. So that changes fundamentally how people communicate and how people interact, and we just learned, of course, that this morning Miami launched an app with a smartphone, and then we're like learning how to control water flows and everything as well, linked to the workforce on their smartphone and everything. So fundamental innovation are changing other verticals that are important. So yes, I mean, we've been at it for 10 years. Yes, it's been diluted. Thankfully, the industry I'm in and now the value of the company is still worth my while, because that's one of the major problems we have as founders.
I work at a company that's been diluted as well, so
that's true. And then the pivot, I think that's very interesting because it's cultural. So in the US, pivoting is accepted and it's seen as positive because you're adapting. In Latin America, it's not as accepted, so you have to fight it. And you have to convince people why you're continuously pivoting or why you're doing one pivot. But if you can survive, then you will find the value you've created. And right now, in the last 3 years, we found the value we've created. And then if you replicate that, then you start having startups that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars for the reason of that value that they finally found after a certain pivoting, but that's experience that is bringing it to you.
that's very helpful. One more question, then we're going to go to the audience, and then we'll see if how are we doing on time there, Jorge? Okay. Sean, a question I don't know if we discussed, but I'm curious, as an investor, when you look at social impact or impact investing on this whole spectrum, which is pretty broad. I mean, people put Uber into that category as well as take Uber out of that category, and Uber's, that's a 5-hour conversation, which I will spare everybody unless you want to talk about it.
You say, no, we're not doing that tonight.
So, but how do you believe the return metrics are the return metrics achievable for venture investing with social impact being the focus of that investment?
Yeah, so I don't want to get too much into metrics, but we sort of test most things that we see with 2 tests. The first is, does this company look like they could potentially impact a particular problem? So it could be anything from our most recent investment is how do you do energy retrofits for low-income neighborhoods, right? So that's a very direct thing. Turns out that's going to be a phenomenal business, right? So I could talk about, yes, there's social good, but it is, when you look at the numbers, it can have, greenhouse gas emissions show up in there. Being able to go into a church in the community and say, we've cut your sort of operating budget in half because we've, sealed the place properly and replaced the boiler if you live, in the Northeast. So it's hard to have like a single metric, but we start with that and then we say, okay, assuming you can do this once in one city, could you get to 100 cities in 5 years? And that's the part where most stuff breaks down. Most things cannot, be packaged in that way and sold at that scale. But I think what we tend to see is that city problems inherently have a social impact. It's very hard to find a problem like water or air quality or access to public transit these are things that if you get them right or you do them better, you spend less, more people get access to them for less money. All those things tend to have a ripple effect. And so it's sort of hard to find bad things, if you like. And then another thing that I think is very important, and people, I think, miss this when they think about social impact, is hiring. Right? So I went to MIT. My lab has people that could have gone and done anything. I mean, they are phenomenally smart people. A couple of them chose to go and build algorithms to do automatic trading, and they are retired, and they are probably going to be angel investors. But the bulk of them went off to do things that they thought were really meaningful. And so a lot of the time when we look at the businesses, the metric around can you get there, can you do this thing, also considers can you hire the really best people to go and get this done. And a really tangible example, so I wore this not wear a tie, but the company Skycatch is a really good example. This is a group of people who played around with drones 2 years ago, had some people show up at their meetup and say, oh, could you come by and survey my farm? Like, I'm just kind of interested in, getting better data about how I'm using my land. The Port of San Francisco said, come hang out with us for a day and get us some overhead shots so we can better plan. And 2 years later, they are working with Bechtel. People know that. It's sort of the largest infrastructure company in the US. They're working with Rio Tinto, which is a small mining company. They have some phenomenal clients. But when the earthquake happened in Nepal, a group of people got on a plane, stopped work, and started imaging and rebuilding maps so that they can figure out how to move aid around and how to do restructure. And I think that's something that goes missed. The sort of 20% of your time at Google, all these things, you get a certain type of person who ultimately probably cares more about the impact. And that's really the only way you can scale. You can make an argument about distribution models and strategy, et cetera, et cetera. If you can't get great people who want to be there for more than just a financial return, you're not going anywhere.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to pause in the action and look out to our audience. I thought I saw a hand over here. I'm going to bring the mic over to you. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just say your name and, quickly where you're from.
my name is Glenn. I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm currently working at the Innovation Lab at Citi. But my question is actually going back to the RFP and the bidding process that you were just talking about, and some of the complications that come with that, both on the private and public sector. But I'm just curious, has anyone ever began the conversation around open format and creating a marketing behind having like open challenges per bid, instead of necessarily having the few that were able to qualify for the bid to compete for the bid, you create more competitors and offer it to the whole city, or the same in the private sector?
Well, you know, one of the things that we've done just in the last really 3 to 4 years is, you know, we have a mayor who's kind of a techie, right? So one of the things that he's told everybody, he's gone to New York and spoken to IBM all over the world really, is that, you know, if you want to innovate, we'll be a beta site. We'll test, you can test just about anything. You bring your folks here, we'll take you through some security measures, but we'll give you access to data, our hardware, our software, our buildings, that if you really want to develop something that, as we talked about, could be scalable to 100 different government locations. If you think you have that type of idea, but you can't break through, come here to Miami-Dade County. If you think you have that one idea that can really transform government across the globe, come here. And there's no procurement process. We're not going to charge you anything. As a matter of fact, when we developed the COPA app that we launched today, Cops on Demand, when we were in the, Microsoft kind of said, well, we're going to do some stuff in your building and in your county for about a year. We'll come back and tell you what we did. And they came back in a year with this app. And they had the smartphone and the screen, and I was like, wow, this is great. Cops on Demand, and people could access all kinds of stuff. And in the meeting, I was sitting there with the mayor, and I said, well, obviously this is something that's gonna catch on, so we have like part ownership of this, right? Because we developed it here in our building, our staff, and the mayor turned to me and he said, no. We told people up front, this is, if you develop something that's scalable and transformational, it's yours. This is a beta test site. So I think that is just one way here at Miami-Dade County that we try to kind of get around that procurement piece, is to tell people you can come and just kind of use us as a guinea pig, and there really is no RP for that. If you want to create something that does not exist or something that's completely out of the box, then try it here, and then we'll, you know, come back around and figure out how we can contract for the service. So that's just an example.
I think there's the biggest challenge I think that most startups have is they would never discover the program because they don't have a dedicated relationship manager that a Microsoft or an IBM would have. And so I think this is going to happen in Miami-Dade, but I'll give you the example somewhere else. In Barcelona, there's a company called Citi Mart. And Citi Mart actually has worked with Barcelona to run open challenges. And what that means is explicitly advertise and seek out small and medium-sized companies to bid on specific problems. And they've subsequently done something like that in about 60 different cities. And I say that I think they are at least in discussions to do something like that here. I don't know what the problem set is, I don't know what the specific challenge is, I don't know how far along the discussion is, but it is happening. And I think what's most interesting, coming back to sort of cities comparing notes or local governments comparing notes and what works, they noticed fairly quickly that they started in Barcelona, and then Paris was very interested in trading and saying, okay, you already solved this, so we're not going to do this challenge again, we just want to see your results. Right? And so there's a certain efficiency that's happening that I think is relatively recent, where you can say all of this stuff is online, it's basically public record, you can see who the winner was, there's a verification that they were deployed successfully, etc., etc. Again, it may take 12, 18 months, whatever the cycle is, but more of the results are open, and they are more just opened procurement processes. So I think that is encouraging, but I think the hardest part is if I have sort of my head down and I'm a startup in Denver, I'm worrying about my relationship in Denver. I have no capacity really to figure out what my next local government relationship should be. So if a company like CityMart reaches out via email and says, by the way, we came across you and we think you'd be relevant, do you want to submit a challenge? It just evens the playing field, right? You really don't need a big relationship management structure to get you, to discover the most interesting opportunities.
So I'm going to speak for the private sector. I was not paid for this ad, by the way. But so you work at Citi, so Citi Mobile Challenge, that's exactly what it's about. They're opening a platform that is, trust me, completely closed before Jorge opened it. And they invite people from all over the world to build new ideas, innovative ideas. At the beginning, they were only startup. It started Buenos Aires, then Bogota, then it went Silicon Valley, New York, Miami. Then I was a groupie in the EMEA tour, so Kenya, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem actually, Warsaw, and London, and then they're going to continue around the globe, as Jorge put in this, and I learned the PowerPoint by heart. But it's 745 plus developers from 100 plus countries. That's impressive because it's one of the first banks that did that. And the beauty of the challenge is that after that, it was not just a PR and marketing effort. They actually launched ideas faster than I've been launching ideas with Citibank, so it's pretty impressive. Doing like things in Guatemala, things in other places of the world where from start at the Citi Mobile Challenge, winning it and then implementing it, it's like 6 to 8 months, which is a record for a bank the size of Citi. So I think that that's the future of innovation. I'm very bullish about that. And it's not because I'm partnering with Citi. I mean, I work with 62 banks and not all of them Citi, so it's quite a lot of banks. And this is the way innovation has to be done in the private sector or the public sector. As you said, open challenges, bring new ideas, then you can parse those ideas through a filter. And in the last Citi Mobile Challenge, you had companies like Accenture, Dell, Amdocs, multi-billion-dollar valuation of companies, established companies participating in this to bring new ideas. And I'm sure Accenture has a contract, or Dell has a contract with Citi and things like that. So it's just a new way of fomenting innovation, like we just discussed in the government sector or the public sector, and this in the private sector. So it's very impressive how innovation is going to change in the next few years. And I'm very impressed by what Citi actually has been doing on that front. And coming here out of Miami, by the way. So Miami is definitely starting to become a tech hub and a hub for technology and innovation in different ways.
And we're blushing. Yeah, thank you. We have a question in the back. A couple more questions, 2 or 3 more. The young woman in the middle there was the first hand I saw.
Hello, my name is Lauren Harper. I'm the co-founder of the Center for Social Change, and we're trying to cultivate the whole social innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem here in Miami. And so I really applaud Citi for having the Open Innovation Challenge and leveraging, it could leverage your existing technologies or come up with new technologies. But my question is also, has that been directed to using technology for social good? And I'm sure it has in some regard into the financial inclusion area.
Yeah, maybe I can help with that. Well, there's Serge was just mentioning about our tour in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And the first place that we stopped was Kenya. And when we got there, we actually knew what we were going to see because this was part of the program that we started 2 months ago. But when we saw the final product that they were able to build, we were so amazed. And the type of innovation that can come from a place like Kenya, Africa, that touches about social, but also touches about fintech and touches about the lifestyle of the people, it was incredible. Now, going to something that is more practical, we just launched a solution based on one of our programs that we launched in Latin America in Guatemala that connects microfinance with small retailers and big companies and have the ability to collect money through iPhones, through phones, not any phone. And that, I think, it's the power of open innovation and open banking, that you can connect multiple players in one single platform to be able to do not just business, but also to integrate the bottom of the pyramid, which is what you're referring to.
Let's see. Yes, sir. Right here, and then we'll go to that question. We have a microphone.
Deputy Mayor. My name is John Ficara, and I work with a company called Farlight. And what we do is we design custom optical networks for cities, universities, large healthcare organizations. And over the last 3 days with Emerge and here now, I've heard talk about how technology is being embraced by towns and cities to make life better for the citizens. What infrastructure challenges and what plans does the city have to deal with those challenges?
Well, I think that's one of the areas that, and going back to the example earlier, I'm trying to paint a landscape of what government really looks like for those who don't often work with government. I'm pretty sure that we have, computers in our buildings that are still running like green screens. Honestly, I can tell, like we talked about how we might buy a product and in 2 years it's not, relevant anymore. We literally are not, it's not in our DNA to really innovate in terms of technology. And so a lot of times it's the private sector that, that drives that cart for us. And one of the things that's very, very effective, almost like I don't remember what you called it, the relationship manager, was that the term that you used? I don't know, the private sector guy. How that person is, kind of cultivates the relationship, but also sells the company. And I think beyond your particular company, what's effective for you is you need to be able to sell the government on the technology and the needs. Almost like you need to, maybe you have a concept for us, and you need to come and spoon feed it to us and tell us why this is something that we need and how it works together, because that's just not what we do. And I'll just give you just a quick example if I could. And this is a real meeting that I was in. I'm going to change the scenario just a bit. Just a little bit. And I'll try not to make it too morbid. So I'm responsible for public safety, obviously. And we, in my daily life, we talk about protecting. Just yesterday, there was an incident outside the port where somebody was driving a stolen police car, was in the port tunnel. We had to stop that person. We gave, Congresswoman gave an award 2 weeks ago about an officer that stopped a terrorist event, or it could have been a tragic event at the airport. This is something that we think about all the time. So I just want to paint this landscape for you. How we do this and how things, connectivity is not something that occurs to us as government. We know, a person, I know I have to fix the road, or my job is to maintain the sidewalk, and that's all I do. I patrol this section of the city. So a company came in last week and they said, imagine you were in the New World Center and there was a hostage event. Now the New World Center, there are cameras in this building, but only the security people for this building can look at the cameras, right? The Miami Beach Police Department can't remotely through an iPad see what's on these cameras because they don't talk to each other. Let alone how does the information move from one place to the other? And the fire department may need to know, right? So now the fire department needs to know what's going on in case somebody here is wounded and needs to get in. And so how do they connect? Because for those who don't know, our police and fire departments are on different frequencies, and the technology doesn't talk to each other. The radios don't talk to each other. They don't work together. And so we laid out, and so we said, imagine if there was a situation, a hostage situation in the New World Center, and I can give you a product that there's people who are in the back of the rooms that are working, and they saw us speaking into the radios. He said, what if I could connect that radio on the person who's working here in the back of the room through a software system to a police officer who was responding to this call, and to the video cameras that are in this building, and I can connect not only those cameras to the Miami Beach Police Department, Miami-Dade County Police Department, both fire departments, Homeland Security, Baptist Hospital, right? So now, when the responder is coming in, or I could have somebody at Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. view the video cameras in here, tell the young lady in the back of the room, the shooter is in the northwest quadrant of the building, the folks in this room are safe, get them out of the exit right here. Imagine how transformational that could be. Now, it never occurred to me, anybody in that room, that this was something that was even possible. Now, they opened up a television and said, here's our software, and I'll hand you a walkie-talkie, and I'm going to connect you to the Port of Boston's harbor master, and you can talk on a handheld radio to the harbor master through a drag and drop technology. So I'm going to drag a video camera in, I'm going to drag your camera in, I'm going to drag a cell phone in, and any method of communication, whether it's a two-way radio, a cell phone, a video camera, any type, we can connect. And the thing that amazed me in that room was I had people from the port, the airport, seaport is where the cruise ships and cargo come in, police, fire in a room, and every single person in the IT staff, and every single person about halfway through the presentation was leaning forward in their seats. And then they started asking questions, people who normally never ask questions. And the third part that was most impressive to me was the one question that was never asked was, how much does it cost? Because it became apparent to us that this is just something that we have to have. And so my point about, and it goes back to your question, is we may not be able, most likely there's no government to really tell you about their infrastructure needs for fiber optics in their city to connect. You need to be able to come in and tell us why your product is something that we need that's going to be transformational in a way that we never thought of. And then once we understand it's something that we have to have, because I can now save everybody's life in this room if I had a system that I can connect Homeland Security in DC with a video camera in this room and in the hallways, and then the person in DC could talk to the young lady who works in the back of the room and through her earphone and tell her how to get out of this building and avoid the shooter. Now you transform what we do, and no matter what it costs, that's something that we're going to get, and again, everybody's going to get that. So my point again is you can't necessarily wait for us in government to tell you what we need. You need to tell us why we need your product and how it's going to make our lives better and the lives of people here in this community better.
That's great, thank you. Last question in the back. And feel free, folks, if you can grab our panelists before they run out the door, feel free to ask questions after the panel, of course. But go ahead.
So you actually answered part of my question with everything that you just said, but my name is Keith Hamilton. I'm a federal business consultant. Help businesses learn how to interact with the federal government, but also at the state, city level. So I just moved down here a year ago, so I'm very familiar with Baltimore, DC, and those places. But specific to Miami, when you have a company coming to pitch an idea or a concept, and we had some mention the difficulty with RFPs and the process of trying to get business with the government, we were joking about how long it can take to go through a sales process, and someone said that it takes longer than 6 to 12 months. What are some of the, specific to Miami, what are some of those hacks that you referred to? What are some of the things you love to see for businesses who are coming to you to make it easy for you to say yes? What are some of the things that make it easy for you to say, yeah, I'd love to, we'd love to have this product, this service, this business, do business. So what can businesses do instead of trying to change the RFP process, because changing things in the government is not easy? What can businesses change in their operations to make it easy for you to do business with them?
I'll kind of bifurcate the question in terms of what can businesses do. I think the first part is to really open the door to get in, to be able to tell somebody about your product or your idea. And that's that you really need to sell the idea. And in terms of, again, don't, if you want to sell me a different type of desktop computer than I already have, then there's 100 companies out there that do that. If you want to come and tell me about the product that's going to replace desktop computers altogether, well, I want to hear that. I mean, so that's something that you need to be able to kind of quickly get the ear of somebody who can make decisions to be able to do that. And I think the other part is, again, to proactively look at the procurement process for whatever it is, the business, the government entity, be it the county, the city. Really spend some time during your day to analyze that process. And then if there's something that you can do, such as, okay, you understand we want to partner with large companies, or the county has a bonus system for local businesses, and maybe you want to partner with somebody who has a business in Miami Beach, and who you're going to get 10% bonus points. So start to already lay the groundwork to position yourself to be successful. But what that means is you're going to have to look at every single jurisdiction. It's just going to take the time to look at every single jurisdiction that you're thinking about doing business in. Look at their procurement regulations and figure out, you have to spend some time figuring out how you're going to position yourself to be not only successful with your business model, but the procurement process as well. Because those companies that do business with governments and large governments spend a lot of time figuring out the procurement system, separate and apart from like a software system. But once you can understand that procurement system and figure out a way to move through that system or innovate that system in a way that's going to benefit your company, then you're going to be successful with government. So.
I just want to say one just funny anecdote. One of the first companies that we invested in that was selling software to local government, the first sort of update session that we had went something along the lines of, so when you cold call, when you reach out to the person that you're trying to reach and ultimately pitch, do you phone them or do you email them?
Both.
Well, so this was something they had just started to think about, and they went and tested it, and it turns out that phoning is much better, by like more than a factor of 2. And I think the way that I tend to think about this is, it's very easy to critique procurement from the outside, right? But you don't want anything that you get as a service from the government to stop working, right? And that's sort of set up intentionally to be that. So a lot of the teams that we work with, I just challenge to say, you haven't done your homework. Like, you don't know how the system works that you're selling into. If we started with very basic things like, do you email or do you call? You just haven't done your homework, right? You can't take your business-to-business sales experience and expect that to work for a completely different type of organization. So I think there's a lot of assumptions that are sort of unduly harsh on the procurement process, but a lot of it is just people haven't done their homework. Like, people who figured this out, when you talk to them, when they've been in government sales for 20 years, this is stuff they know. They will go through a list of, it works like this, these are not complicated things, it's just doing your homework. But the phone and email thing for me was probably one of the funnier experiences of just like, okay, why would you make that assumption? And once you test it, it's pretty revealing.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody coming, and our panelists. Let's give a round of applause. And I'm going to give the microphone back to Jorge, and thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you to the panelists again, a round of applause. I think what we just heard is precisely why we have this Fintech Meetup, which is the ability for you guys to connect, to understand what's going on. I know that we have here people that are investors. I know that we have startups. And frankly, I didn't know that Miami was so open about innovation, so I applaud the city of Miami. That's fantastic. That means that you really mean to change the city for good, because if we're able to present new ideas to the city of Miami, things that they're not even thinking about, that's something that we should leverage a lot. And it's open to all of you to create a new solution, and there's going to be funding for that. So congrats on that, and thank you for coming. Keep coming to our meetups, and hopefully you will make more business. All right? Thank you.